What unseen currents ripple beneath the surface of your being, steering your every thought and deed? Welcome to True Freedom, where we plunge into the shadowed depths of the human psyche, seeking the wisdom that liberates us from the illusions we cling to. Today, we stand before the monumental legacy of Sigmund Freud, whose audacious vision of the mind reshaped our understanding of ourselves. Often mocked for his provocative ideas or reduced to a caricature of sexual fixation, Freud's true brilliance lies in his creation, psychoanalysis, a tool that peels back the layers of our consciousness to reveal the turbulent forces underneath. His insights have woven themselves so seamlessly into our modern worldview that their once radical edge now feels almost mundane, a testament to his enduring triumph. Yet, a question haunts this legacy: did Freud craft his evolution in splendid isolation, or has it resonated the voice of Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher he publicly disavowed? Freud's denials falter against a tide of evident citations in his texts. Quiet praises to confidence suggest both saw the conscious self as a fragile outpost atop a vast unconscious, a humbling truth that beckons us to explore our own depths. At True Freedom, we embrace this inquiry as a philosophical odyssey, tracing Freud's journey from Vienna's intellectual crucible to his exile in London. His life mirrors the psychic upheavals he charted, humiliations that dismantle our ego's pride, offering clarity in their wake. Join us as we unravel his theories: the unconscious, the Oedipus complex, the interplay of id, ego, and superego entwined with Nietzsche's echoes, illuminating a path to freedom through the love of wisdom. Sigmund Freud stands as a titan in the chronicles of human thought, a man whose intellectual courage pierced the veil of our comforting delusions to expose the chaotic underbelly of the mind. Born in 1856 in Moravia, now a region of Nietzsche, Freud's early years unfolded a middle landscape of cultural flux and familial expectation. His family's migration, first to Leipzig and then to Vienna, placed him in a city pulsing with intellectual vitality, a fitting stage for a child whose brilliance emerged early. Steeped in the classics of Latin and Greek before most grasped their mother tongue, Freud was poised for a conventional path, or, as his family anticipated. Yet, in a quiet act of defiance, he chose medicine at the University of Vienna, setting forth on a journey that would reshape our understanding of the psyche. His medical pursuits led him through the dissecting rooms and hospital wards, where he probed cerebral anatomy and observed those then termed psychotics, individuals whose minds seemed to fracture under unseen pressures. His fascination with mental aberration took root, blossoming into a lifelong quest to decipher the hidden forces within us. The pivotal moment arrived in 1896 with the death of his father, a figure whose presence in Freud's life was both formative and fraught. This loss plunged him into a period of profound introspection, catalyzing the creation of his first major work, The Interpretation of Dreams. Published in 1899, but boldly dated 1900, Freud proclaimed, "The next century shall be many a prophecy that time would vindicate." This book, alongside later works like The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, The Ego and the Id, and Civilization and Its Discontents, cemented his ideas into the bedrock of modernity, their once startling novelty now a quiet cornerstone of our collective psyche. Freud framed his contribution as the third in a trilogy of humiliations inflicted upon human narcissism, each as scar-etched by the Enlightenment's relentless pursuit of truth. Copernicus first struck, revealing that Earth is not the universe's center, toppling our illusion of cosmic primacy. Darwin followed, asserting we are not divine creations, but evolved beings, imperfect, transient threads in nature's vast tapestry. Then came Freud, delivering the most piercing wound. Our minds, he declared, are not ours to command. And the ego, that proud overseer we imagine ourselves to be, is a mere surface, a fragile construct resting atop an unconscious, steaming with impulses, emotions, and even philosophical stirrings that operate beyond our awareness. This is no trivial observation. It is a seismic reorientation of our self-conception, a call to peer into the abyss within. Here, a resonance emerges, one Freud sought to silence: Friedrich Nietzsche. In the interpretation of dreams, Freud acknowledges Nietzsche as a direct precursor of psychoanalysis, citing his assertion that the great activity is unconscious. Yet, by 1908, at a meeting of the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society, Freud disavowed this influence, claiming he abandoned Nietzsche's works as too daunting or irrelevant to his formed ideas. This denial rings hollow. Ernest Jones, Freud's friend and biographer, records a striking admission. Freud marveled that Nietzsche possessed more penetrating knowledge of himself than any man who ever lived or is likely to live, a tribute that jars with Freud's public disdain for philosophers, particularly one named Nietzsche. The evidence of influence is compelling. Wilfred Dadler, a contemporary, drew parallels between Freud's psychoanalysis and Nietzsche's genealogy of morals. In Freud's debut work, Nietzsche is not a peripheral figure but a foundational presence, his ideas threading through the exploration of dreams as unconscious revelations. Both men envisioned the psyche as a fractured multitude, not a sovereign unity. When Nietzsche spoke poetically of the will to power and the unconscious as a primal force, Freud translated these visions into clinical practice, forging psychoanalysis as a tool to navigate this unseen realm. The question of whether Freud consciously borrowed or unconsciously absorbed Nietzsche's thought is secondary to their shared revelation. The self we know is a shadow cast by deeper, untamed currents. Freud's life offers a lens into this convergence. A prodigy who defied familial expectations, his shift from law to medicine reflects the psychic rebellion he later theorized, a refusal to be bound by authority. His father's death unleashed the interpretation of dreams, a text rich with personal echoes, summers in the Alps, the vibrant pulse of late 19th century Vienna details that faintly mirror Nietzsche's own retreats into nature's solitude. Initially selling just hundreds of copies, the book's legacy grew, its ideas now a cornerstone of Freud's oeuvre. Here, he posits dreams as more than fleeting whims. They are portals to the unconscious, fulfilling wishes to taboo for waking acknowledgement. The virtuous man contents himself with dreaming that which the wicked man does in actual life, he writes, suggesting dreams cloak desires we dare not claim. This claim rests on empirical ground. Freud recounts a patient, the girl, dreaming of her sister's child, lying dead, a scene tied to a funeral where she last saw a man she loved. The dream, he argues, masks a yearning to reunite with him, not a wish for death, its imagery a shield against conscious guilt. Freud's own dreams deepen this insight. After notable achievements, he dreamt of his father urinating on himself, a reversal of a childhood memory. When having wet his parents' bed, his father scorned, "That boy will never amount to anything." In the dream, Freud triumphs, casting shame back upon the father, a wish fulfilled through symbolic retribution. His personal thread weaves into the Oedipus complex, a concept both derided and profound, where the child's rivalry with the father and desire for the mother mark a universal stage of development. The Oedipus complex emerges from Freud's psychosocial stages: oral, anal, phallic, each tied to an erogenous zone. In the oral stage, the infant finds pleasure in the mouth through feeding. Premature weaning might yield an adult fixated on oral habits, smoking, overeating. Freud's own death from oral cancer, cigar in hand, invites speculation about his theory's roots. The anal stage follows, where potty training links pleasure to control. Disruption breeds obsessiveness, the anal retentive. The phallic stage centers on the genitals, culminating in the Oedipus complex. A boy fixates on his mother, the father a rival. Healthy progression moves beyond to latency and maturity. Fixation or regression spawns neuroses. Critics balk at its universality. Do we all harbor such primal urges? Yet its power lies in illuminating rebellion against authority, a theme Nietzsche champions in his own way. Nietzsche's voice echoes here. Inhuman, all too human. He observes dreams weaving external stimuli, a bell's ring, a cannon's roar into narratives, reasoning backward from effect to cause. Freud quotes this, aligning with Nietzsche's view that dreams reflect a primordial logic persisting within us, a bridge to our cultural origins. While Nietzsche critiques rationality's illusions, Freud harnesses dreams diagnostically, viewing them as symptoms of mental health, akin to a psychotic's hallucinations. This convergence is no accident. It reveals a shared philosophical current. The mind's depths defy our conscious grasp, demanding we confront them to truly know ourselves. Freud's career unfolded in waves of brilliance and turbulence. By 1908, psychoanalysis surged, propelled by works like the Psychopathology of Everyday Life, which introduced the Freudian slip and unguarded confession of repressed feelings, as when one misspeaks a truth they'd rather hide. In the 1920s birthed Beyond the Pleasure Principle and the Ego and the Id, refining his Triadic model. The id, a chaotic it of drives; the ego, a perceptive surface; the superego, a moral arbiter forged in childhood. The 1930s brought peril. Nazi annexation of Austria in 1938 forced Freud, a Jew, to flee Vienna for London, where he died of oral cancer in 1939, his ideas enduring beyond his exile. In The Ego and the Id, Freud, via Georg G. Rodek and Nietzsche's Das Es, maps the id as the unconscious totality, something we don't own but are. And the ego, born of perception, floats atop this abyss, while the superego, shaped by childhood dependence, represses the id's urges, echoing parental and societal authority. This structure mirrors Nietzsche's clash of natural drives and civilization's mores, as in his unpublished notes. The mores demand that one bear the displeasure of an unsatisfied desire. The superego, Freud argues, inherits the Oedipus complex, internalizing the father's power to subdue a psychic architecture that sets humans apart, binding us to culture's yoke. Freud's totem and taboo scales this to myth. A primal patriarch monopolizes mates, sons slay him, guilt births laws, a narrative grounding the Oedipus complex in collective psyche. Renjard sees mimetic desire here. The son covets the father's prize, igniting conflict. Nietzsche's will to power parallels Freud's libido, both sublimated into civilization's achievements. In Human, All Too Human, Nietzsche calls love a sublimation of sexual instincts, a notion Freud echoes in Civilization and its discontents, where repressed drives fuel lot, science, morality. This sublimation unites them. Freud's libido, like Nietzsche's will to power, transcends mere instinct, birthing culture from constraint. Let us dwell on Freud's dream theory, for it unveils his philosophical richness. Dreams, he asserts, are not random flickers but deliberate dramas, weaving life's fragments, sights, people, places into tales of hidden meaning. They draw from recent impressions, yet probe depths beyond daily trivia. His empirical tests tickling sleepers with feathers, altering room light showed dreams, adapting to stimuli, proving the unconscious active hand. Nietzsche concurs, noting in Human, All Too Human how a dreamer incorporates a bell's toll, suggesting a primal reasoning we've not outgrown. Freud's patient dreams amplify this. The girl's vision of death masks a longing for reunion, its horror a veil for hope. With father dreams, reversing shame, fulfill a wish to judge, not be judged. This wish fulfillment, Freud argues, is dreams, chord a dreams to, echoing waking fantasies we deny. In Dream Psychology 1920, he refines this. A girl's death dream conceals impatience for a lover's presence, repression cloaking desire in acceptable form. The unconscious, then, is a living force, not a passive storehouse. Freud's Triadic model crystallizes this. The id, Nietzsche's it, is the mind's raw essence. The ego navigates reality. The superego enforces morality. This echoes Nietzsche's Daybreak. Nothing contains more of your own work than your dreams, yet we fear them, ashamed of their revelations. The Oedipus complex, though disputed, roots this in personal myth. A boy's rivalry with his father, desire for his mother, marks a stage, its resolution maturity, its failure pathology. The critics question its universality, yet its resonance lies in rebellion against authority, a Nietzschean motif. Totem and taboo, Freud imagines a tyrannical father slain by sons, guilt-forging laws a tailger, hard ties to mimetic desire, Nietzsche to Power's Evolution. Sublimation bridges their philosophies. Freud's libido drives creation beyond sex. Nietzsche's will to power births philosophy. Civilization, they agree, is repression's fruitate ruth, true freedom embraces as liberation's key. Freud's life Vienna's ferment, Nazi exile, London's and mirrors this struggle. His theories, born of personal wounds, reflect a universal quest to know ourselves beyond ego's illusions. Nietzsche's influence, denied yet undeniable, enriches this, urging us to face the abyss with courage. Philosophy, here is lived emancipation, all true freedom answers with every exploration. Let us expand this tapestry further, for Freud's vision demands it. His early work with Joseph Breuer on hysteria unveiled the unconscious power patients, symptoms dissolving through cathartic recall, suggesting buried memories shape us. This insight fueled the interpretation of dreams, where Freud dissects his own psyche alongside others. His summers in the Alps, like Nietzsche's retreats, hinted a shared reverence for solitude's clarity. Dreams, he found, adapt to stimuli. A feather's touch alters their course, proving the unconscious vigilance. Nietzsche's parallel insight that dreams weave external sounds into narratives underscores their shared belief in a mind beyond conscious rule. Freud's patient cases deepen this. The girl's dream of death, tied to a lost love, reveals repression's artistry, desire masked as tragedy. His own recurring vision of his father's shame thips a childhood wound into triumph, hinting at the Oedipus complex's personal genesis. This complex, though mocked, probes a universal tension, authority versus autonomy. Freud stages oral fixation in smoking, anal rigidity in order map how early disruptions echo through life. His own cigar-laden demise invites introspection. Did he live his theories' flaws? Nietzsche's presence persists. This twilight of the idols critiques rationality's illusions, a theme Freud echoes in Dreams as diagnostic tools. Both see civilization as a taming force, Freud through sexual repression, Nietzsche through power's restraint. Their convergence in sublimation, libido and will to power fueling culture offers a profound insight. Our greatness stems from shackling our nature. Freud's civilization and its discontents mourns this cost yet celebrates its yield, mirroring Nietzsche's human, all to human on love's selfless turn. Freud's exile, fleeing Nazi Vienna for London, reflects his theories' upheavals. With death in 1939, voice silenced, left a legacy that speaks still. Nietzsche's influence, though veiled, amplifies this, a call to embrace our depths, to find freedom in truth. True freedom honors this, weaving philosophy into life's fabric, a quest for wisdom that unshackles the soul. Sigmund Freud's legacy unveils a mind both fractured and luminous, a realm where id, ego, and superego dance amid echoes of Nietzsche's wisdom. A true freedom. We've traversed his journey from Vienna's brilliance to London's exile, finding liberation in their shared truth. Our conscious selves are but ripples on an unconscious sea. This humbles us, yet frees us to understand, to sublimate, to rise above illusion. Philosophy, here, is no idle pursuit but a path to authentic living, a gift we unwrap with every exploration. At shadows, stir your dreams, what truths do they unveil? Share below, let's kindle a dialogue that sets us free. Like, subscribe, and spread true freedom's mission with others seeking light. Next, join Emma and James as they probe deeper, their voices a lantern for our journey. Until then, embrace the unseen, it holds the key to your truest self.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into the unconscious mind.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, and we've got two big names to guide us. Freud.
And Nietzsche.
Right. Our source material is this fascinating podcast episode called Freud Unveiled, The Hidden Echoes of Nietzsche's Wisdom from the True Freedom podcast.
Or I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
So you know how sometimes it feels like there's this whole hidden world going on beneath the surface, like influencing our thoughts and actions?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, Freud and Nietzsche were all about exploring that world.
Definitely. And it's amazing how they both ended up grappling with these similar questions, even though they came at it from different angles.
Right. Like they both saw the self as this battleground with all these different forces clashing.
Exactly. And they thought civilization itself was built on repressing our primal instincts.
Whoa. That's deep.
It is.
So in this deep dive, we're basically tuning into their conversation.
Across time and discipline.
Exactly, to see what they can teach us about ourselves and what their ideas mean for us today.
You know, Freud saw his theories as part of this lineage of intellectual revolutions. He actually considered his work on the unconscious to be the third blow to humanity's ego.
The third blow, okay, I gotta know, what were the first two?
Well, first you've got Copernicus telling us that the Earth is in the center of the universe.
You're right. Big blow to our pride there.
Then you've got Darwin saying, hey, guess what? We evolved from apes.
Okay, another reality check.
Right. And then Freud comes along and says, hold on. It gets even crazier.
Yeah.
You're not even in control of your own mind.
Oh.
Yeah, he argued that this vast hidden realm that he called the unconscious was influencing our conscious thoughts and actions.
So not only are we not the center of the universe, but we're not even fully in control of our own minds. That's a lot to process.
It is. It really challenges our assumptions about who we are.
So to really get this, let's back up a bit and talk about Freud himself.
Sounds good.
Who was he before he became Freud?
Well, he was born in 1856 and eventually moved to Vienna, which was a really exciting intellectual hub at the time. He was a brilliant student, particularly in the classics. His family expected him to go into law, but
he didn't.
No. In a move that kind of foreshadows his later rebellious theories, he decided to study medicine.
Interesting. So how did he go from medicine to the mysteries of the mind?
Well, his medical training led him to work with patients struggling with what were then called psychotic disorders.
Okay.
And he became increasingly fascinated by how the mind works, especially all those hidden depths.
I can see how that kind of work would lead you to those deeper questions.
Absolutely. And this fascination was even further intensified by a personal tragedy, the death of his father in 1896.
So this is where his groundbreaking work on dreams comes in.
Precisely. After his father's death, Freud went through this period of intense self-analysis, which led to his masterpiece, The Interpretation of Dreams.
The one that was published in 1899, but he intentionally dated it 1900.
That's the one. He even boldly proclaimed, the next century shall be mine.
Wow. Talk about confidence.
Right. And, you know, in a lot of ways, he was right.
So how did Freud actually see dreams as a window into the unconscious? Did he have like a secret dream dictionary or something?
Not a dictionary exactly, but he did develop this whole method for interpreting dreams. He believed that dreams weren't just random images, but carefully constructed narratives full of symbolic meaning.
Interesting.
And these symbols, he argued, could reveal hidden desires and anxieties.
So it's like dreams are speaking a secret language that we need to learn how to decode.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. His method was based on the idea of free association. He'd ask patients to describe their dreams in detail.
Okay.
And then he'd encourage them to just freely share whatever thoughts or feelings popped into their minds when they thought about those images. It was all about uncovering those hidden layers of symbolism.
Gotcha. So do you have a good example of how this actually worked in practice?
Absolutely. So Freud described this case of a young woman who dreamt about her sister's child lying dead.
Oh, wow. That's a disturbing image.
Right. But through careful analysis, Freud discovered that the dream was actually masking a deeper desire. Yeah, the woman had lost a man she loved, and the last time she had seen him was at a funeral.
Oh, I see.
So the child's death in the dream wasn't literal. It was a symbolic representation of her longing for a reunion, even if it could only happen in that context.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how dreams can disguise our true feelings. Makes you wonder what our own dreams might be trying to tell us.
Definitely. And Freud didn't just analyze other people's dreams, he meticulously analyzed his own, too.
Oh, wow. So what kind of things did he discover about himself?
Well, one dream that stands out involved his father. He dreamt that his father was urinating on himself.
Oh.
And this dream was actually a reversal of a childhood memory where Freud had wet the bed and was scolded by his father.
Interesting.
It's like he was symbolically enacting a kind of retribution in his dream.
Like he was working through some complex feelings about authority and his father.
Exactly. And this leads us to one of Freud's most famous and controversial concepts, the Oedipus complex.
Yes, the Oedipus complex. I feel like everyone's heard of it, but not everyone really understands what it means. Can you break it down for us?
It's definitely a complex idea.
Yeah.
Essentially, Freud proposed that during a specific stage of psychosexual development, a young boy develops a subconscious sexual desire for his mother
Okay.
and sees his father as a rival for her affections.
So it's like this primal love triangle playing out in the unconscious mind of a child.
In a way, yes. But it's important to remember that Freud wasn't suggesting that these desires are conscious or acted upon literally.
Okay,
It's more about a symbolic struggle for power and autonomy within the family dynamic.
gotcha. So it's about the child's developing sense of self in relation to their parents.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And Freud believed that this stage is a crucial part of healthy psychological development.
Okay.
Successfully navigating this complex leads to the development of a mature and balanced personality.
Makes sense.
But if this stage is disrupted or unresolved, it can have a significant impact on a person later in life.
So how does this Oedipus complex fit into Freud's broader theory of psychosexual development?
Well, Freud outlined a series of stages that children go through, each associated with a particular erogenous zone and a set of developmental challenges. The Oedipus complex emerges during what he called the phallic stage, which typically occurs between the ages of 3 and 6.
And didn't he believe that getting stuck or fixated at any of these stages could have lasting effects on personality?
Exactly. For example, someone who has difficulties during the oral stage, which is the first stage, and focuses on the mouth and sucking, might develop what are called oral fixations later in life.
So things like smoking or overeating could be seen as expressions of those fixations.
Exactly.
Huh.
And it's interesting to note that Freud himself was a lifelong smoker and ultimately died from oral cancer.
Huh, that is interesting.
Yeah, it's led some people to speculate about the connections between his own life and his theories.
Okay, but let's stick with the Oedipus complex for now. I have to admit, the idea of a young boy having these unconscious desires for his mother feels a bit disturbing to think about.
I understand. It's definitely one of Freud's most controversial ideas.
Yeah.
But remember, he was trying to understand these hidden forces that shape our personalities, and those forces aren't always pretty or straightforward.
So what did Freud believe was the significance of the Oedipus complex for a child's development?
He saw it as this fundamental conflict between the child's instinctive desires and the need to conform to societal norms.
Right.
Eventually, the child learns to repress these desires and identify with the same-sex parent, internalizing their values and morals.
So it's about learning to control our impulses and integrate into the social world. Makes me think about how we all have to learn to balance our own needs with the expectations of society, even from a very young age.
Absolutely. And if we zoom out a bit, we can see how the Oedipus complex for Freud was a microcosm of the broader tensions between our primal urges and the demands of civilization.
That's fascinating. And this idea of a clash between our inner nature and the constraints of society is something that Freud shares with Nietzsche, right?
Absolutely. And that's where this hidden conversation between these two thinkers gets even more interesting.
Okay, but didn't Freud try to distance himself from Nietzsche's influence? Didn't he say that Nietzsche's work was irrelevant to his own?
He did publicly downplay Nietzsche's impact on his thinking. He claimed he had abandoned Nietzsche's works because they were too difficult or just irrelevant to his own ideas.
But you're saying that's not the whole story.
Not at all. There's actually pretty compelling evidence to suggest a much deeper connection. For example, Freud's biographer Ernest Jones recorded an instance where Freud admitted that Nietzsche had more penetrating knowledge of himself than any man who ever lived or was likely to live.
That doesn't sound like someone who thought Nietzsche was irrelevant.
Exactly. And when you really compare their work, the parallels are pretty striking. They were both fascinated by the power of the unconscious. They both saw the self as this fractured thing, a battleground of competing forces.
Okay.
And they both believed that civilization is built on repressing those primal instincts.
So maybe it's less about whether Freud consciously borrowed from Nietzsche and more about the fact that they were both wrestling with these similar questions about the human mind.
Exactly. They were both pioneers in exploring the mysteries of the unconscious, and their insights continue to challenge us today.
They do,
Yeah.
for sure. So we've been talking about this tension between our primal urges and civilization. It makes you wonder how we even function as a society if we're all wrestling with these powerful unconscious forces.
Right. It's a good question. And it leads us to another key concept that both Freud and Nietzsche explored.
Which is sublimation.
Sublimation. Yeah, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully get it.
So think of it this way. We all have these raw instincts, these base desires, but we can't just act on them all the time. Society wouldn't work very well if we did.
Yeah. So sublimation is basically the process of channeling those instincts into more socially acceptable outlets.
Okay, so instead of, let's say, giving in to a sudden urge to yell at your boss,
Right.
you might channel that energy into a tough workout or write a really intense song.
Exactly. You're redirecting that raw energy into something positive and even creative. For Freud, the primary instinct that undergoes sublimation was the libido,
Libido.
which he saw as this driving force behind all our desires, not just the sexual ones.
Interesting. And didn't Nietzsche have a similar idea? Something about the will to power.
Yes. Nietzsche believed that this will to power is a fundamental human drive, this striving for self-assertion and mastery.
Okay.
And just like Freud's libido, this will to power can be sublimated into all sorts of creative expressions.
So both thinkers believed that some of our greatest achievements, our cultural advancements, might actually be rooted in these primal urges that we're constantly trying to control.
It's a really profound insight, right?
Yeah.
Civilization itself, with its laws, its art, its philosophies, could be seen as this huge project of sublimation, this way of channeling our raw instincts into something that benefits everyone.
Wow, it really makes you think, like, what masterpieces wouldn't exist if artists hadn't found a way to channel their deepest desires into their work? Imagine a Van Gogh painting or a Beethoven symphony.
Right, were those created through sublimation.
It's a really interesting thought.
And this convergence on the concept of sublimation shows a fundamental similarity in how Freud and Nietzsche viewed humanity.
Like, they both saw civilization as this necessary compromise, a way of taming our wild instincts, but not completely getting rid of them.
Exactly. And while they might have disagreed about the specifics of those instincts, they both thought that sublimation was key for individual and societal well-being. It's like this delicate dance between our inner nature and the demands of the world around us.
So we've talked about dreams, the Oedipus complex, and sublimation. What other key ideas should we explore from Freud's work? What about his famous model of the psyche, the id-ego and superego?
Ah, yes, the id-ego and superego. Those terms have definitely become part of everyday language.
They have, but to be honest, it's a bit tricky to keep them straight.
I know, right? It can be.
I remember learning about them in school, but it felt like trying to understand a foreign language.
Well, imagine it like this. There's this constant psychological drama going on in our minds. And you've got the id, which is the impulsive, instinctual part of us, the part that wants instant gratification. It operates on what Freud called the pleasure principle. It just wants to satisfy its urges no matter what.
So the id is like the inner child always demanding what it wants when it wants it.
Exactly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the superego. This is the moralizing, judgmental part of us. It's like the internalized voice of authority and social norms.
So the superego is like the strict parent, always reminding us of the rules and trying to keep those impulses in check.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And caught in the middle of this psychic tug-of-war is the ego.
Poor ego. So what's its role in all of this?
The ego's job is to try to mediate between the id, the superego, and the real world. It operates on what Freud called the reality principle, trying to find practical and acceptable ways to satisfy our desires.
So the ego is like the exhausted mediator trying to keep everyone happy and prevent a full-blown psychic meltdown.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. And Freud believed that a healthy personality depends on this balance between these three forces.
Okay.
If the id is too dominant, we might act impulsively. If the superego is too strong, we might become overly rigid and repressed. And if the ego is weak, we might be overwhelmed by anxiety and struggle to cope with life.
It's amazing, isn't it? To think of our minds as this constant interplay of different forces struggling for control. It's like this whole hidden world operating below the surface.
What is? And while some specifics of Freud's model have been challenged over time, it still offers a powerful framework for understanding human behavior. It's helped shape how we think about ourselves, our relationships, and even the nature of being human.
And speaking of Freud's life, it's interesting to think about how his own experiences shaped his theories. We talked about the death of his father, but what about his later years?
Well, his later years were marked by another major upheaval, his exile from Vienna in 1938.
Because of?
The Nazi annexation of Austria. As a Jew, he had to flee his homeland and seek refuge in London.
Right.
He died there the next year, leaving behind this legacy that continues to fascinate and provoke us.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds aren't immune to the forces of history and the darkness that can take over societies.
It's a sobering thought. But even facing those challenges, Freud's work reminds us of the enduring power of the human spirit to seek understanding, even in the darkest corners of our minds.
Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the unconscious mind with Freud and Nietzsche. We have covered so much, from dreams and the Oedipus complex to sublimation and the id-ego and superego. It's a lot to process. So as we come to the end of our journey, what does it all mean? What are the big takeaways here?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is that we're not totally transparent to ourselves. There's so much happening beneath the surface of our awareness, shaping our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
It is a bit unsettling to think about, right? That we're not always in complete control.
It is a bit, but it can also be kind of liberating in a way.
Oh, how so?
Well, if we can understand these unconscious forces, maybe we can start to make more conscious choices.
I see what you mean. Like we gain more agency.
Exactly. Understanding the unconscious helps us see ourselves more honestly and with more compassion. We can start to recognize those hidden patterns and motivations that might be driving our behavior, and then hopefully make choices that are more aligned with who we really are.
That makes sense. It reminds me of the title of that podcast episode we've been talking about, Freud Unveiled, The Hidden Echoes of Nietzsche's Wisdom. It really is about uncovering those hidden truths that can lead us to more freedom.
Exactly. Both Freud and Nietzsche believed that self-knowledge is the key to freedom. By facing our shadows, those unconscious desires and fears, we can break free from ignorance and live more authentically.
That's powerful. So for our listeners who are now totally fascinated by all of this, what's a good way to start exploring their own unconscious minds? Where do we even begin?
Well, a great starting point is with your dreams. Keep a dream journal by your bed and write down your dreams as soon as you wake up.
Even if they're weird.
Especially if they're weird. Don't worry if they seem strange or fragmented, just get them down.
So just capture those glimpses into the unconscious before they fade away.
Exactly. And don't just write down the images, explore the emotions and associations that come up for you. What do certain symbols or characters in your dreams represent to you? What are they trying to say?
It's like we're all amateur psychoanalysts trying to crack the code of our own minds.
Haha, in a way we are. And while we might not all have Freud's genius for interpretation, just paying attention to our dreams can be really revealing.
So it's about being curious and open to the messages our unconscious is trying to send us.
Exactly. And remember, this is a journey of self-discovery, not a race to find the right answers. Be patient with yourself and trust the process. Allow yourself to be surprised by what you find.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's been fascinating and a little bit unnerving to explore this hidden world within us.
I agree. Confronting the unconscious can be challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding. The more we understand these forces that shape us, the more control we have over our own lives.
And that self-awareness can lead to more freedom, just like Freud and Nietzsche said. It's been amazing exploring their ideas.
It has. And while we've only scratched the surface of this huge and complex topic today, I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring the mysteries of the unconscious mind.
Thanks for joining us on this intellectual adventure, everyone. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.